Hey, I'm back. And today I want to ask you, who taught you to retire? Think about it. Is that something that you have to learn to do? Do we learn by watching the people around us retire? Our parents, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents. Who taught you to retire? Do you have to learn to retire? I thought about this. I was writing about this, right? About this first month of retirement for me. And I realized I didn't really have a whole lot of examples, right? So that's what I want to ask today. That's what I want to talk about. Who taught you to retire? But first, if you're new here, I'm Sabongale. This is We Don't Retire, We Ascend, because to retire means to retreat, and ascend means to soar, right? Um, and I also want to shout out to all of those of you who have subscribed to the channel. I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for your support and for giving me your vote of confidence. I really appreciate it. Please, if you know a black woman, a brown woman who is retiring, who has retired, who recently retired, who's thinking about retirement, right? Or even any young women who are also learning to retire, right? Please share this channel with them, like and subscribe, and let me know more about the, I don't want to say challenges, more the challenges, issues, successes that you are facing as a black woman in retirement, right? But again, thank you to those subscribers. I appreciate you. Um, so who taught us to retire? When I thought about it, um, well, for one, you know my story. Both of my parents made their transition when I was in high school. This was back in the 70s, mid to late 70s. So my parents didn't live long enough to retire. That's the first lesson, right? That's the first lesson. I'm not a financial guru or anything like that, but for those of you who are waiting for a certain age to withdraw Social Security, to see if you have enough money built up in your 401k or your savings account, or trying to figure out when you can retire because you still want to continue to make that good money, assuming that you are making that good money or whatever money you're making. I know some people who feel like I can't retire because I can't afford not to work. I can't afford not to have health insurance. I completely understand that. There's a lot of you, right? But how much money do you have to make in order to know that this is the time to retire? Okay, and I can't tell you when to leave your job. I'm not telling anybody to quit their job. You know what you need to do or have to do or can do. But do it faster, because again, my mother died when she was 40 years old. I've already outlived her by 20 years. My father died at 53. They died within a year and a half of one another. And my mother was primarily a homemaker, so she really didn't have a retirement fund or anything like that. This was before we really knew about IRAs and before we trusted investing. My father, I don't think that he had any type of investing knowledge, or even though he went to business school. But again, this was like in maybe the 30s and 40s when that happened. He did have a successful career as a medium security at a medium security institution as an officer, right? An officer at a medium security institution. And he seemed to be on a track to do very well there. However, he died at 53 from lung cancer. And my mother had heart disease, high blood pressure, hypertension, and died from cardiac arrest. So they never even reached what we consider now to be retirement age. And even if they did, what would that have looked like? Okay. My grandmother and my mother's stepfather, who we called grandpa, right? He was my grandfather. He worked, I think, as a driver, if I recall correctly, as a driver for a hospital in St. Louis many years ago. And I believe he retired, but I back then, grown folks didn't tell kids they business. So I don't know what kind of retirement he had, or what kind of money or investment he had, or even I think he may have had a pension. I'm not sure. I know he got Social Security. Um, but again, grown folks didn't discuss their business with kids back then, so I really don't know. What I do know is that they never owned a home, okay? And I don't think that's because they didn't want to, but they never owned a home. They always rented, right? And always rented like flats, right? They never owned a single family unit. So I don't recall exactly how much income he generated once he retired. My grandmother, on the other hand, continued working for a little while afterwards. Okay, but like a lot of black women back in the day, she rode 2 city buses to get to the suburbs to clean house and to keep a house for a white family who owned an electric company in St. Louis. Okay, and she always bragged about the children of this family. And I don't even recall how many years she worked for them, but she worked for them when I was a child, and she was still working for them when I became an adult. So I know it was at least a good 20 or 30 years. Okay. This family, if I remember the story correctly, this family um, promised her a pension when it was time for her to stop working. They promised her a pension. But when she stopped working, there was no pension. Um, this family also paid my grandmother in cash. My grandmother always had cash, right? I don't even know if she had a bank account. She had a fourth grade education. Um, and she took the work that she could get, right? And she did it well for many years, okay? Um, they promised her a pension that was never there. And so, were it not for the fact that my grandfather worked long enough to get Social Security, um, and for her to get a Social Security check when he passed as a survivor, she got his Social Security check. Were it not for that, she would have had nothing, right? So, when people retire, and even I have people in my family who retire, black women who retire, and they retire because perhaps medically and health wise they couldn't work anymore, or they basically just stopped working, right? They may have had a little bit of savings, but no, and maybe a 401k, right? I'm not sure like to what extent they invested, but for the most part, when people in my family and my immediate family and people that I knew, when they retire, um, they just stop working. They don't really retire. Just, oh, sorry, I don't know if you could hear somebody's car out there. Um, but yes, mostly they just stop working, right? Even back then, I don't even remember like retirement parties. And even recently, very few women I know in my family, right, have retirement parties. Um, they have they don't have these big plans for retirement. They're just so glad they ain't got to go to work anymore. They're just glad they don't have to go to work anymore. So one day they're working, and then they'll go to church on the weekend, and then the next day they're not working anymore. So who taught you to retire? It occurred to me that as African American women, right, um, we basically work, many of us, over the years, not maybe not as much nowadays, but over the years, African American women work until they simply can't work anymore, right? Again, I hear even now, I hear young sisters, like when I say young, I mean like 30s, 40s, 50s, who feel like, oh, I gotta work another 10 years. I gotta work another 20 years or 15 or how many ever years. They see absolutely no way out of the workforce. And they get, once they get a good job, right? Meaning a job that you can pay your bills, take care of your children, um, and maybe buy a pizza on the weekends. Once they have a good job, they feel obligated and they feel chained to it, literally, like mentally, not literally, but mentally chained, right, to that job until when? Some future date that they believe that they'll finally have enough money to just stop working. Okay? When the first good job that I had, I worked in St. Louis for a company called McDonnell Douglas. You may have heard of it. It's now it's now Boeing. Boeing bought them out many years ago, and I worked at this company. This was the first company that I worked at that had a 401k. I didn't understand it then. I was still young. Um, I don't think that I invested anything in it, right? Because I didn't know any better at the time. But this gentleman who had a better job there, I don't even remember what his position was, right? I worked in the cafeteria, I think, at the time, but he told me something that I've never forgotten, and that is when you get a good job, and you make good money, it's only going to be enough money to keep you coming back, right? You'll never make enough money to get rich. You'll never make enough money um, to retire properly, I guess I could say. It'll never be enough, right? They're always going to pay you just enough to keep you coming back, just enough to hook you and keep you coming back, right? And only enough money for you to continue to consume, right? And of course, being a consumer means always keeping up with the trends, always making sure you have the latest and the best and the biggest. And you'll always have to continue to pay more and more money for those things, which means you will stay on the hamster wheel and work and work and work. And for those of us who are in the habit of taking care of other folks, we'll get what we need and then continue to work and work and work for other people to make sure they have what they need. So, again, I began with the question, who taught you to retire? And what did you learn about that? Right? Most of us learn that we may never retire, that we will just work and work and work. Um, and it shouldn't be like that, right? We should be able, if we must work, it should be long enough to make a living, to live the life that we want. And a lot of that has to do with the society we live in and inflation and but again, another man once said to me, it's not what you spend, it's what you save. I haven't quite learned that yet, but we really need to learn how to retire well, right? And it's beyond like having the parties to announce to the world, okay, I no longer have to work. Because frankly, I may, you may want to work, right? Um, but and I say that because I'm retired from the job that I had for 20 years, okay? But there are things that I still want to do. Um, and 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 I'd like to make some money doing it. Editing is one of those things. I've always wanted to work in the publishing industry and writing. and being a published author. So yeah, there are things that I still want to do to earn money, and we can do that, right? Um, but there are other things that I'd like to do that um, does not require me to be someplace from 9 to 5 every day for 5 days a week or six, right? So we have to learn to retire, but we have to learn to retire in a way that suits and pleases us, right? I use the word retire. Always know that I use the word retire very loosely, right? Um, and for a little while, I said that no, I'm not retiring. I'm graduating, right? It feels a little bit like a graduation. You know, people congratulate you. You know, you may get gifts. Um, but a graduation also implies that you've earned the right to rest, right? A graduation implies that you've taken these steps and you've achieved this level of excellence and you've earned your way to not have to work anymore, right? Um, but I wanted to change that to ascend because we have to elevate our way of thinking about retirement, especially as Black women. It's for some of us, you know, it's hard to imagine not to have to work and in some cases still get a check, right? In some cases, still have enough money in the bank to do what you want to do outside of work, right? Outside of for someone else. And yeah, I, I don't want, I kind of don't want to admit it, but there are moments when I feel that I should be doing something. I'm trying to get rid of that thought, right? I'm trying to. But there are moments when I feel like, okay, I need to get up out of the bed. I really do. It's almost 11 o'clock. I need to get up. There are those moments when I feel that I need to be productive, but I've been that way. I've been productive for over 45 years. And we are taught that if you don't work, you don't eat, right? But I'm learning and I'm working to internalize that all my needs are met. Like Sister Sandra from Lack to Legacy always talks about abundance, right? Creating abundance in our lives. It's out there. And even when I practice Buddhism, one of the things that the founder of the organization I was in would say is there is abundance. There's money all around. Just pull it out the sky. It's there. It's there. Money is being transferred globally on a regular basis, right? Daily. Why shouldn't we have some? At least to meet our needs, right? To meet our needs and to do the things that we want to do. Money is just the vehicle, but the source of our supply is always there. The source of our supply is always there. Our needs are always met. They will always be met. They always have been, right? It will always work out. So we need to learn how to retire. We need to create the retirement or the ascension that we can envision for ourselves. What does that look like for you? Comment below. I'd like to know. What does that look like for you? Have you retired? Have you already retired? Are you looking to retire soon? Okay? If you're in your 40s or 50s, do you envision yourself or can you foresee yourself retiring even before age 62, 65? Now they want you to wait until 70 because they say we are living longer, people are healthier, so you need to work until you're 70. Uh-uh. Mm-mm. Not at all. Not at all. If I work till I'm 70, I'm going to be sitting over a typewriter typing out the next great American novel if I'm working at all at 70. So, yeah, I want to know, what does retirement look like for you? Did you have an example? Did you have an example of a beautiful retirement, right? A retirement that didn't mean what? Sitting at home on the weekends, because essentially, like I said, people that I know who retire, they just go from not working or from working to not working, right? Their retirement looks like the same thing that their weekends normally looked like while they were working, right? They work on Friday. Saturday they clean house, perhaps if they have time, they'll clean house. Maybe sit around and watch a little television in the evenings. Sunday, go to church. Monday, back at work again, right? So now their retirement is doing that every day, right? They don't travel. They don't take up new hobbies. They don't do anything that they thought they wanted to do when they were 20 or 30 or when they were kids, right? Um, they don't learn anything new. They don't meet any new people, right? A lot of the people that they knew or know growing up, people their own age, excuse me, people their own age are either also aging, right? Um, and people that you know, of course, the older we get, the more people that we know are making their transitions. So it's hard for us to go out. It's hard for us to be a part of our peer group. You know, a lot of us get set in our ways, so we don't want to meet any new people, right? Because everybody else is, the way they are, and you are the way you are. So usually their retirement just looks like all the same things that they did before they retired, except the part in the middle where they actually go to work. But what does your retirement look like, right? And it doesn't have to be traveling abroad. It doesn't have to be moving abroad, right? It could be right within your own state or your own city, right? I'm certain that I've been in the Atlanta area now for about 34 years. There's so much I haven't done here. There's so much that I haven't done here. So, yeah, we are coming of age. We are coming of age at 60, 55, 60, 65. We're coming of age, coming of ageless. What is that going to look like for you? Hmm? Tell me about it. I want to know. And by the way, everybody, I love this t-shirt. I bought this t-shirt when I turned 60. Yeah, vintage 1962. I wear this shirt. If y'all see me in this shirt multiple times, it's because this is one of our favorite shirts in the wintertime, all right, when it's cold. So yeah, let's all learn to retire. Let's learn to retire together. Let's learn what this ascension can be like, what it can mean for us, what it can mean for our daughters. How about that? What are you teaching your children about retirement, about loving themselves enough to give themselves grace, particularly during this time of their lives? What does your life look like? Because believe it or not, they're learning one way or the other, just like we learn from our parents. And you know what? I meant to talk about this earlier, but in the black community, in the African American community, and the African American tradition, when you consider what we have come from, like slaves didn't retire. Slaves did not retire. They didn't have retirement parties. They didn't go back to school at 62. Slaves worked until they died. Mm-hmm. Think about that for a second. Perhaps your great great grandparents, depending on how far back you can go, Some of us knew folks who were sharecroppers, which was an extension of slavery, right? Slaves did not retire. We have been given a gift. We have been given a gift. And while we are strong, while we are healthy, let's put our lives in order in such a way that we don't have to work until we drop. There are steps that you can take now. If you're 30, 40, 50, and you don't have to be a millionaire. I just saw a post um, online, and someone, um, oh gosh, someone was asking the question. Oh gosh, I think I just forgot it. It'll come back to me. Oh, we were talking about um, having $1 million, right? If you had $1 million right now, would you quit your job? Would it take $1 million for you to quit your job? Well, for myself, I can only speak for myself. Uh, I didn't need even half that much, right? I didn't need a quarter of that much. It doesn't take $1 million to retire. And I know that there are many of you who are in the FIRE movement, the financial independence to retirement, something other. I can't remember all of it. And if you're in your 30s and 40s, you can do that. You know, you can set an age that is not 62 or even 55, right? Um, because you don't have to retire to be happy. That's another thing. That's the first thing. You don't have to retire to be happy. But if you are 30, 40 years old, you can plan to retire whenever you want to, right? It's doable, right? And you don't need $1 million, okay? Of course, at 30, 40, 50, there are plenty of other things that you may want to do. And if you decide that you want to work, fine, work. Do something that you love. Do something that you enjoy. Do something that is meaningful, right? Don't be a slave. Don't just work until you die or work until they can't use you anymore. Work until you are so unhealthy that all you can do on the weekends and during the week once you retired is go to church and come home, and cook dinner for Big Daddy. That was my little joke. So yeah, don't be a slave. Don't work until you drop. You don't have to, right? We have been given a blessing, right? After all of these years, those people who came before us worked until they dropped, right? They made that sacrifice. They didn't have a choice, but they made that sacrifice. But we have choices as black women of the 21st century, coming of age. We have a choice, right? So now we have to teach ourselves to retire, teach ourselves to have a beautiful retirement, a peaceful retirement, an exciting and adventurous retirement. We can reclaim and recreate retirement for us.